I think all the people that were here to talk about shopper research need to understand that the shopper research takes place in the context of not only the consumer's overall life, but these consumers have a bigger life beyond their consumption life. The idea that we are all people, and it's that level of what connects us as human beings. My Macroforces presentation was about. The brand pyramid is really changing, and there's two basic groups of companies out there right now. They're the companies that most of us represent that are trying to add that third layer. We know the first two, but how is it your brand is adding in that second layer, that top layer called social emotional attributes? You can't really read the words in there, but it comes down to this. Does your brand care for the personal well-being of somebody? Does your brand care for the community well-being? Or does your brand care about the environmental well-being? If you look at all the small little brands that are emerging these days, and I got a few of them represented here, Tom's Shoes, the Innocent brand, this gentleman Seth is from the Honest Tea Company. They start their company saying, I don't need all that other stuff. I know I have a social mission. The social mission is their reason for being. That's how they started. Those of us, the Colgates, the Krafts, the Nestle's, we're all going to be competing against these. PepsiCo and Coca-Cola, we know that these types of small little companies are the ones that are going to give us a lot of the hardest competition. We get to choose what a brand is, and it is something that is evolving over time, because the role it's been playing has always been about saying, okay, this is a mark of the quality of the product, and you can understand that this brand will promise you a certain product experience. All of the brands have done such a good job at doing that, that now we're asking ourselves, what is the difference between pretty much similar products at this point? And when it comes to doing this greater good, it serves the brand. The brand has three roles, and there's a great paper by Andrew Curry at the Futures Company that outlined this. But number one is, the people that are working at a company, when their brands are doing social good, you really are motivated and inspired. It gives you a purpose and a meaning at your job that makes you more engaged in what you do, and you end up doing better work. And then the brand, sometimes you're in a category where they're all so similar that you need a way to stand out. Why not stand out in a way that is saying, here's our statement about how we're helping make the world a better place? And then lastly, when you're thinking of these issues, because they are based on long-term trends, if your brand has built into it a component about helping some greater good, it gives you a longer-term vision, and it helps you with your longer-term planning and keeping a goal that is consistent over time. If you get caught up in the day-to-day issues of most brands, you end up staying so busy you never lift your head up to see where is that horizon and where am I heading. I also grew up with a lot of philosophy in my household, and this is one of my favorite quotes from Viktor Frankl, which is, don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to fail. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It can only ensue. And it only does so as the unintended consequence of pursuing something greater than yourself, of dedicating yourself to a cause greater than yourself. Now think about kind of the trends that you know of that are going on in this world. There's this idea of the greater good and helping things. Where business is now being asked to play a different role in society. Brands are being asked to play a different role in society. And the key thing in this quote here is these two words. Because sometimes what you really want, you can't go after it directly. You have to kind of go about it in a roundabout way. There's an economist who's written a lot about this, John Kay. He has a book called Obliquity, which talks about this. Oftentimes, if something you want that's important to you, for example, if I want you to respect me, the more I look like I'm yearning for your respect. If I want you to fall in love with me, I can't go too directly toward that. Happiness is another one of those things. You all know the people who just spend their life trying to be happy, and they're often going to make themselves even more miserable. And I'm using this idea to ask, what are you guys doing? We as a research community are trying to achieve something. And when you're a shopper researcher, what is it you're trying to achieve? And I've heard many things. I didn't realize the complexity over the last few days of all the things that go into shopper research and the retail environment, but at the same time you're doing brand building, and you're also taking into account that these aren't just shoppers, the consumers behind them. But there's kind of a general theme that I'm hearing, which is, you know what? All that understanding, what at the end of the day is to try to get more of your product into the basket. And if this is what we're pursuing, or I want to kind of flip it around and say, maybe this is what we're hoping can ensue. It's an opportunity. Brands don't have an obligation to do this. They can choose to do it or not do it. And by the way, I want to give some credit to Lloyd from the Futures Company. He was the one who was talking about people in Germany that were afraid of falling out of the middle class, down. But it's also something we're seeing in many, many different countries. Because after this latest economic crisis we've had, a lot of people, I've stopped asking myself, how can I improve my life? And they're asking the other question, which is, how can I simply keep the lifestyle that I have right now? It is a concern that is growing around the world. But the idea is, are we going to help them maintain that lifestyle? Are we going to show that the community that we operate within is as important to us as our own well-being? And if they can see that we are as interested in helping them as we are in helping ourselves, then I think their connection to our brand will be that much stronger. We as corporations have to be aware that civil society is gaining in power. They're gaining relative to us, they're gaining relative to governments. We've seen a lot of the Arab Spring issues going on. And on the right-hand side, we see all these really bad things. Yeah, we have Snowden, and we have Occupy, and we have Anonymous and WikiLeaks. Those are very confrontational ways for society to say, we're going to take back some power. But really, the stronger issues are on the other side there. If you use TripAdvisor to get here, if you go to Yelp, if you go on Facebook, it's those softer connections that are giving us more power. This young girl started a petition online when she saw there was an ingredient in Pepsi's Gatorade that she didn't like. And what I really like about this example is when Pepsi responded to this, their response wasn't, oh, we've got smart scientists and so we're making a better choice. They said, you know what, that girl's right. We are concerned too. We're going to make this change because she brought it to our attention. Listen for these changes. When your company makes an announcement on something change, are you giving agency, are you giving the responsibility for the change to yourself or to the outside world? Because this idea of macroforces and trends is really sort of an emergent observation that comes out of all these different things. Some people are out there writing about large trends. I think the one that most people will probably be familiar with is Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. But also I think a better book to introduce yourself to this idea is the idea, Dan Pink has a book, wonderful book. It's very small and it's several years old now, but it's called A Whole New Mind. And A Whole New Mind is a book that talks about, look, we got Asia, automation, and abundance, three of the macro forces that I was talking about. But then the second half of the book says, okay, in that environment, what are the qualities that are going to be valued even more? So in the future, when we have those three macro forces everywhere, people who are able to synthesize data, that are playful, that can tell stories, that are design savvy, the things that computers and machines can't do are the things that you and your company need to get really, really good at. That's why you're seeing the sort of a theme going through a lot of the business books right now about words about innovation or creativity. No computer is going to take that away from human beings. That's going to be you as a person and you as a company, your competitive advantage. And that's also morphing into other areas too. Think about the other things that machines can't do. There's a book out there called Search Inside Yourself that a Google employee has written. It's all about mindfulness, attunement. It's about emotional intelligence and social intelligence. Because we are in a world of interconnectivity, where that is all a latticed organization more than a hierarchical organization, and we're connected both inside our companies and outside our companies, those interpersonal skills are becoming more and more valued. So those are just a few examples that come to mind, but as you start to look at it, we as a society are starting to value the ability to connect more at a deeper human level than ever before. I think that this is really the first ever macro force. And by definition, a macro force is something that affects how we all see ourselves, how we experience this world. Macro force is something that causes you to think differently about the world. And in 1972, when the Apollo astronauts turned around and took a picture of the world, this image right here, which a lot of us think of as, we just kind of grew up with this. Well, it's part of our shared experience. When you think of yourself as being on this small little life raft, that we are all really truly together, you think differently. Because the idea that we're separate was what most people grew up with. Because you think of my city, my religion, my country, your people. And this was one of the first times we started to go, wait a minute, there is a reason to think of us as all together. And you can feel how you feel when you take that perspective. Mother Teresa would say that the problem with humanity is that we just draw that circle of family a little too small. What I thought this picture was doing at the time was getting everybody just to consider the fact that maybe we do have to draw that circle a little bit wider. And this was kind of at the beginning of our environmental movement. What causes these environmental movements? You know, sometimes we think they just start. Sometimes there are small little things that cause us to ask ourselves new questions. And when you ask yourself new questions, what's likely to happen? You're likely to think different, or do things different, or feel things different. And now if you are sitting there at your office and going, I really enjoy this cultural research. I enjoy the sociological perspective. I want to think about the greater and bigger issues. Ask yourself, how can I actually bring that into my company? Because if you start to do the day-to-day routine and year after year goes by and you haven't really lifted your head up and said, where am I really fitting into this? Where's my company, my brand really fitting into this? Somebody's got to do that because the consumers are asking the same thing. If it's something that's meaningful and passionate to you, it's meaningful and passionate to a lot of consumers out there. So the sooner your brand, the sooner your company does it, the better.